Brought to you by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. JMRNY.com. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and joining me via Zoom today, she is an accomplished actor and filmmaker, Miss Andrea Ward. Welcome, Andrea.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you. Now you're over on the left coast, the other end of the world, right?
Where it's nice and sunny. Yes,
Where
I
it's
am
nice.
based out of Los Angeles, California.
Yeah, I'm sitting here freezing my butt off in New York, in my Brooklyn apartment with very little heat. But it's been so much fun shooting from home since the pandemic. New and fun challenges for the show. So I want to talk to you. You've got a project that you're turning into a series, coming from a short film. I want to talk about that. You also have some stuff coming up in the future that we're going to talk. But first, I want to talk to you about you. So, kind of, how did you come into acting, filmmaking? What is your origin story, so to speak?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking. So the origin of my story, oh, I said I wasn't going to mention it, but I originally started out in fashion. I've been in the fashion industry since I was 18. So that's a little over 10 years. And eventually I merged into acting and film and production. I got inspired by the life and story of my great aunt, Billie Holiday. And so I noticed that the production companies and these writers weren't telling her story the way that they should. So it inspired me to be a filmmaker and to write stories of my own and share and tell my truth. And as far as acting goes, I've always been interested in acting as a kid. I grew up on martial arts. I grew up on Bruce Lee. I grew up on Stephen King. And since I was a kid, I always wanted to be a writer and a storyteller. And Stephen King is what inspired me to get into writing. And as I got older and I learned more about the industry, I fell in love with it. But I noticed with our industry, they weren't telling true, authentic stories. And so I've survived so much in a short period of time that I thought it was time to tell my truth and to be authentic and give the people what they want and what they need to hear, because maybe my story could perhaps change someone else's life.
Your great aunt, Billie Holiday, there was a movie about her, Lady Who Sings the Blues, I think. You've seen that, obviously, but you didn't think that was all cricket kind of thing.
Nope, they didn't capture her character correctly. My grandmother grew up with her, and my grandmother was gracious enough to leave me her journals before she died.
Oh, wow. I gather you learned a lot from that. And is that a story that you want to tell?
Yeah, it's a future film. It's already done, and we are going into production depending on between this year and next year as well. But just because of COVID protocols and the spikes of the cases going up, it kind of pushed everything back a little bit. But the future film, the script is already done. I have production, cast, and crew.
This project that you've got, another thing it's called Deception Streets. Uh,
Yes,
and
Deception Streets.
this started as a short film, right? And now you're going to turn it into a series. So can you talk a little bit about, well, first of all, give us like give me the log line, like the Hollywood log line of like what it is, and then kind of how it came to be.
Deception of the Streets is inspired by true events. So, a gangster returns to the city of Chicago seeking revenge on those that betrayed him, even if it means fulfilling his bloodthirst urges.
Is he a vampire or something? You mentioned Stephen King, so is or is he's just out kind of for revenge kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay. So you did this as a short film, and did you go the festival route with it and stuff?
Yes, we're still going the festival route. We've got accepted into a lot of film festivals this year, and they're going to last throughout the year as well. I think the last one would be September. But it was inspired by true events of a story or a chapter of my life I closed long ago. It was a terrifying experience seeing these things, but I wanted to speak my truth. That was a part of my experience, and it was a story that needed to be told because it may be more people that are currently going through these things, or more victims or witnesses, because there's always something that someone else can relate to you that could possibly make a difference, if not create that courage to speak out.
When you say that this was inspired by true events, is it a true story per se, or is it like, is the character sort of an amalgam of other people that you knew growing up?
No, this was inspired by true events. It wasn't like a ton of different people. It was based off of one person that committed these acts.
I don't know, maybe for legal purposes, but can you say kind of more about that, or can you get into the nitty gritty of the story at all?
I'm afraid not.
Okay. But it's a gangster movie, basically. Does it have sort of a, because it's based on this true life stuff? Does it have like a documentary type feel to it? Is it more like a film noir stylized? How would you describe the feel of it or the genre of it?
The genre of it is crime and thriller and drama. It's a very dark series. I mean, well, short film. It's a very dark short film. It would almost make you question what the character's motive is or why he is the way he is. So of course there is always a background story to the main character.
And then how did you, now this is something you made out in LA. Did you make it during the pandemic or before the pandemic?
I actually created this during the pandemic.
So how are you able to film that? Because I know that a lot of people listening, like a lot of my audience is filmmakers, up and coming people. So they want to know, like, can you talk about like what the challenges were and how you were able to kind of get over the challenges?
Yes. So the challenges with that is making sure that all the cast and crew were free of COVID. So of course we had to do the COVID testing beforehand. And then everyone had to social distance at least 6 feet apart. There was gloves. I had to wipe down the sets. Each time we filmed something at a different set, it had to be wiped down before, after, and even during and in between takes as well. And also actors are so used to interacting with one another very closely. So I also had to get their permission whether or not they were comfortable with interacting with the other character closely, just because of COVID. Also, on set, we usually have food, beverages, everyone shares. We had to pre-package everything or buy everything separate, where so no one would be able to share their food or drinks or anything. And then also getting a crew that knew how to do more than one task or one skill set, which also cut the numbers down when it comes to production. I know here in the state of California, they want maybe 10 and less when it comes to sets. So what I did was I got each person that knew how to do at least 2 to 3 things, which helped a lot. Also with actors, I had to schedule actors on different days to film stuff, to fill the scenes, just because I didn't want too many people on the same set, because then they'll be violating the COVID guidelines. And then also having a compliance officer there, and then a nurse on set as well, and someone else from the CDC. So that stuff can become very costly and very pricey after a while. So we ended up filming everything in a matter of 3 days, which wasn't bad at all.
Yeah, I think, what you're going through, and I've gone through a bit of it myself because I worked on a project last year. And, for us, it was like we filmed like one actor at a time, sort of interview style. We shot exteriors for the most part with crew was like 2 people, and everybody's distance and all that kind of stuff. It's not fun. It's a total pain in the neck, but it's good to see that, well, for one thing, especially if you're dealing with SAG. SAG is very protective. They're a very good union, and they put these protocols in place. We actually, on the show, we reported about this when it was happening, and these protocols are coming out. It's good to see that people are actually abiding by them, even for a short film. Even when you're not like a big Hollywood film, you're like an independent film. But yeah, I think this is the new normal. Do you see a plan being uh, if you're doing it as a series? You think it's going to get picked up? You want to get distributed by a network? Yeah, like, do you know where you see it landing, kind of a thing?
Yeah. I see it and I know for certain it will get picked up by a network because there is quite a few networks that are already interested in the project. Because me writing the project and putting this together, I'm also one of the survivors from the case. So, I mean, that would grab any network's attention because you don't get content like that, let alone someone that survived a serial killer. You can't find that anywhere. And if you do, it's very rare. But moving along, I see the way production is going to go for near future endeavors is that everyone's going to be staying and more than likely filming at one location at a time, maybe for the next like 10, 20 days, without anyone going in or out of the location to slow the spread of COVID. I know that there's going to be more detailed guidelines as time progresses because the cases are surging. And then we have a second strain of the coronavirus, which we know nothing about. And it's getting hectic. And also people are staying home more. So these networks, they're hungry for content. They're looking for any type of content right now, but it's very rare that you find great content that's going to capture the audience attention.
My question too is, if you're coming to this from a writer point of view, so when you wrote it, did you write it for these protocols and having like, oh, I can only have so many people on set, so my budget's going to be this. I kind of, I mean, for me, it's I know from my personal experience, it's like re-engineering. It's like reverse engineering everything. I want this, but how do I get that? And it's like all of these amazing like obstacles that you've got to hop over and maneuver around. But was that kind of in the plan? You say, what, I'm going to have to, as you're writing it, you say, I'm shooting this, and now I'm going to have to deal with COVID, so I have to rewrite everything for that situation.
Yes, yes. So I wrote this right at the beginning of the shutdown, and when the president of the United States mentioned coronavirus. So that's initially when I began to start writing. And as time progressed, I started to learn about the protocols, and I'm like, okay, how can I implement this in the script so that way I won't have to go back and worry about any near future endeavors or filming dates. So I think it was very smart of me to do that instead of just going back to the script and making all these revisions and trying to figure out the location, how many people are going to be on set, who's going to be interacting, the location, where are they coming from. Everyone was based out here in Los Angeles, so everyone on set was local. Because if you're flying someone out from a different state, they have to get a COVID test, more than likely before they get on the flight. And then after they get off flight, and then they have to be in quarantine for at least 14 days because you're more than likely to catch it at an airport or someplace public.
Yeah, the way I see the whole thing, it's going to be this is going to be here for a while. Obviously, this is not like, oh, we had 1 year. We just don't know. We don't know when we're going to get to anything resembling a form of normal. But you have another project too, right? That's coming up now. Is this a feature project? What is this project that you want?
It's a feature film.
Okay, and this is called Hope Rebirth. Did I get that right?
Yes. Mhm.
Talk about that a bit.
So this film is more of an inspirational film for women and children that suffer of the hands of domestic violence or abuse. I myself am a survivor of domestic violence, so I was inspired to write this piece to create more hope for the victims that are currently going through abuse and for those that have survived the abuse and that doesn't have that inspiration or guidance to want to pursue their life. I call it life after the storm. So this project has the social issues of domestic violence, affecting our communities with a hint of superheroes. So I wanted to intertwine the two and to create a sense of hope and courage for the victims of abuse and survivors, because it's not every day that a person would be able to live to tell the story let alone to have that guidance after a storm like that. And that affects you for the rest of your life. So I wanted to take that stand and be that great example for the women to look up to and to be inspired by this film because they are not alone. You know, men go through this, children go through this, everyone goes through this, and this issue is much more common than what we thought it is.
Let me ask you, like, so, and you don't have to get personal or anything like that. I don't really ask personal questions on my show. It's more about, art and the project and so forth. But coming from that angle and developing something from that, how did that kind of color what you were doing? And like, especially in the last project as well, talking about being a survivor, how do you think that, was it hard to work through that? To, because writing is hard enough. Anybody who says writing is easy, I never believe them. But, but coming from that, was it cathartic? Was it hard? Like, what was that experience like? Just trying to get that stuff on a page.
At first, it was very difficult to relive those moments and memories and just to transfer what you've been through and relive those moments onto paper or onto your computer in a script. But after a while, it became very therapeutic because I started to feel better. Like I started to feel as though this script, this story could make a difference and save someone else's life.
Most people don't have that experience. That's everybody comes at writing from a different angle. But if you're writing the latest superhero movie, or if you're writing some hard-boiled detective film noir kind of thing, it's a different experience than what you're talking about, writing from real life. And you can't. I don't. Maybe you'll disagree with me, but I don't think you can really write real life. If it's exactly the way it happened, it's usually not a good movie. Like, you have to movieize some things. It sounds like you probably had to do that, right? Um, but do you feel like if there's anybody, I don't know if people listening to this, but I wanted to ask you kind of what your advice would be. If someone came from either your situation or something similar, where maybe they wanted to make a film, or if they wanted to translate this experience, kind of turn a negative into a positive, and put something out there. Is there any advice that you would give somebody if in that position?
So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So this year I'm launching a program called Life After the Storm. It is a mentorship program where I guide them step by step with other business professionals and other people that are experienced in that level of expertise. So I very quickly like guide them each step of the way, the process, and getting them to work through their pain, their emotional trauma, but also getting the help that they need so that they can be successful when it comes to film or any other endeavors.
How does that work? Like, what are the logistics of that? I mean, especially now since we're all basically still under lockdown. Are you going to have like conferences? Are you hooking people up with doctors? Like, how does that? How do you see the logistics of the program working? In other words.
So it's a little bit of both. So I'll be connecting individuals with doctors, professionals that specialize in an area when it comes to emotional trauma, and as well as having conferences, Zoom meetings. We usually use GoTo as well. Usually we would do a public event at a physical location, but because of COVID and not trying to spread it any further, we're doing everything virtual. I know virtual has been a little bit more tedious, but it has its perks as well. When it comes, we don't have to travel as much. We don't have to leave the comfort of our home. We could be comfortable, but I'll still be able to have those resources. And even if those individuals aren't comfortable in their home, there is another location that I have access to. It's called Hope Gardens. They specialize in providing homes for women and children that are currently going through it.
In terms of what you did, like, you kind of took these experiences and you put them on a page, put them on film. Is that for everybody? I mean, is that something, is it the type of thing where maybe going through that again and that experience? Because, when you write it on a page, it's one thing. It's like, so you put it on ink and paper and it's almost where it can't hurt anybody. But, when you put it on film, you got to see it over again. Was that a difficult experience, or is that something that you're saying like maybe not everybody should do, or did you find it more cathartic to do that?
It was more therapeutic for me. I'm not saying that it would be the same way with everyone else because watching it on film and writing it on paper may cause more pain than it does good. So it just depends on how strong that person is and how much they're willing to heal or how much they have healed already. Because in order to start that process, you have to have some of your wounds healed at least. Because if your wounds are still open and fresh, you're not going to finish the project. You're not going to be able to get through it because you have a constant reminder and you have not had the time to heal. It took me 5 years to heal with my emotional trauma and those wounds to heal and close.
That makes sense. Like somebody who's literally like in a shelter and in danger is probably not going to write a best-selling book, or a self-help book or a novel or something like that. And we should not expect them to. I think some people they get intimidated by the challenge of, I went through this thing, now I have to put it into some artistic form, and it's difficult, especially if that's not what you're sort of what you do every day. But I think it's going to work for some people. It's not going to work for others. And I'm glad that you said that because you do need that. You need some kind of an aesthetic distance. Do you see this as being sort of part of what you do? Like, is everything you going forward going to be about healing or helping, or are you going to make like a silly comedy at some point?
Yeah, everything that I do is for healing and helping and just making a difference. Like I write all genres of different films and different scripts. It doesn't have to always be serious. It doesn't have to always be based on a true story. But a lot of things that I write is inspired by a true story in some shape or form. It could be romance, it could be comedy. I've lived so much and I've gone through so many different things in a short period of time. I have stories to tell for years.
So I'm going to wrap up shortly, but for people who want to know more about you and find your work, where can they find you on the web?
AndreaWardOfficial.com. I also have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
AndreaWardOfficial.com and all your social medias there.
Yes, thank you. And I also got picked up for two new projects.
Oh my
One is
God.
a feature film about an assassin. So I am playing a female assassin, which is going to be fun. I start my martial art training in 2 weeks. And another one, I play a lead. It's called Music Saved Me. So it's about police brutality and the violence in the surrounding communities as well. I am a wealthy daughter of a A&R executive of a label.
These are pictures that you're acting in?
Yes.
But these are not yours. You're not writing because you only have so much time in the day. I don't know how you do all this stuff. But that's great. So website, AndreaWardOfficial.com. We'll look for you there and keep us up to date. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we got for you today. Thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including our movie reviews, visit our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Andrea Ward, and our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.